What will you do if you are in his shoes? Victor worked as a fisherman for several years to send his wife ADAOBI to art school abroad. As soon as she graduated and got a high-paying job, she did this to him.
You smell like fish. Get out of my house, fisherman.
Yes, so my daughter is right.
But that is what I did to send you to school abroad. Is this how you repay me? Nani? Thanks for the help, but you are below my status
Yes,
now.
so
Get out of my house and never come
My
back.
daughter is right. Chase him out.
In the town of Abeokuta, where the great Olumo rock watches over the people like a patient elder, there lived a young fisherman named Victor and his bride, ADAOBI. They were not rich people. Their home was a modest compound near the riverbank, with walls the color of ochre earth and a roof that sang when it rained. But inside those walls lived something money cannot build, a love so quiet and deep it moved like the river itself, unhurried, faithful, strong beneath the surface. ADAOBI had always dreamed of becoming a master cloth-dyer and fashion designer. Not the kind who sells wrappers in the market, but the kind whose name whose Adire cloth hangs in galleries in Lagos and Accra, whose name is spoken in the same breath as the great dyers of Abeokuta. One evening, as the sun melted into the Ogun River, they sat on the bank together, their feet in the water, a small notebook between them. First, you go to Accra, Victor said, pointing to the notebook where he had drawn a simple map. You train at the textile art school. I will fish every morning, sell at the market, and send you money every week. ADAOBI leaned her head against his arm. And when I return with my certificate, then you open your atelier right here. You design, I fish. We build something that lasts. Deal, she said. She kissed his cheek, and the river carried the sound of their laughter downstream. They had been married 3 years. 3 years of dawn waking, of mending nets by lamplight, of eating simple food with grateful hearts. When the letter arrived from the Accra Textile Art School, a scholarship, full 2 years, they held each other and wept with joy. The morning ADAOBI left for Accra, Victor packed her bag, pressed fresh money into her palm, and walked her to the motor park himself. He stood in the dust and waved until the bus disappeared over the hill. Then he turned back to his river. In Accra, ADAOBI blossomed. She learned the ancient secrets of indigo and cassava paste. She learned the difference between tie-dye and resist dye, between Yoruba Adire and Ghanaian Kente traditions. Her hands, once only familiar with cooking pots, learned the language of color and cloth. And every week, without fail, Victor's money arrived. Not always much, sometimes barely enough, but it arrived. Victor had expanded his fishing business to cover 3 more sections of the river. He woke before sunrise, fished until midday, sold at the market in the afternoon, and repaired nets at night by the light of a kerosene lamp. He did not complain. He told no one of his sacrifices. He simply kept his promises the way the river keeps its banks, steadily, without drama, without end. When he could afford it, he sent a small note with the money. Just a few words scrawled in his uneven handwriting. The river is full today. I am thinking of you. Come back soon. ADAOBI graduated at the top of her class. There was a girl at the school from a wealthy Accra family, a tall and beautiful woman named Abena, whose father had connections to fashion houses in London and Dubai. She had been watching ADAOBI since their first semester. She would bring her fabric samples, save her a seat in the dye workshop, offer to help her source materials. I have a husband, ADAOBI would say politely. Abena would nod and smile, but she kept appearing. When ADAOBI returned to Abeokuta with her certificate, Victor slaughtered a chicken and cooked her favorite ofe onogbu soup from memory, the way her mother had taught him 3 years before. He had borrowed a clean agbada from a neighbor, ironed it carefully, and hung small colored lanterns along their compound wall. We did it, ADAOBI whispered, clutching her certificate. "You did it," Victor said. "I only held the rope." But something had shifted in her eyes that he did not yet understand. ADAOBI found work quickly in a textile house in Lagos, the kind of place she had always dreamed of. High ceilings, important clients, women in expensive shoes who spoke about fabric the way priests speak about scripture. Victor remained in Abeokuta, waking with the river. When ADAOBI came home on weekends, she was quieter. She looked at the compound differently. The cracked walls, the nets drying on the fence, Victor's worn sandals by the doorway. "Your hands smell of fish," she said one evening, not unkindly at first, just observing. "They have always smelled of fish," he said, smiling. She did not smile back. The first sign came when Victor visited her in Lagos. He had made a particularly good sale at the market, enough to take her to a small restaurant near her office. He wore his best kaftan and took the morning bus. He met her in the lobby of the textile house. She was standing with two colleagues, both of them draped in expensive fabric, laughing about something. When she saw Victor, her face did something complicated. "Victor, why did you come here?" "I wanted to surprise you." "You should have called," she said, steering him away from her colleagues. "This is a professional environment." "I just wanted to take my wife to lunch." She glanced back at her colleagues. "You smell of the river." He looked at her quietly. "I came from the river." He took the food he had brought, thanked him quickly, and returned to her colleagues. He walked back to the bus stop alone, past the boutiques and the shining cars, his worn sandals slapping against the pavement of a city that did not know his name. It was her mother, Mama Chidinma, who arrived with 4 boxes of luggage and an agenda that needed no announcement. Mama Chidinma was a woman who measured a man's worth in land, titles, and the quality of his shoes. She had never fully approved of Victor, the fisherman, the river boy, the one who worked with his hands and wore the same kaftan to every occasion. Now she saw her opportunity. She moved into the Abeokuta compound and began her quiet work. She cooked ADAOBI's favorite meals. She filled her daughter's ears with a steady drip of carefully chosen words. "Look at him, fish scales on his hands, sand on his feet. Do you know what your colleagues in Lagos would say if they saw your husband? He paid for my education," ADAOBI would say. "He did what a husband is supposed to do. A farmer plants seed. We do not thank a farmer for planting. We expect a harvest. Now, tell me, what harvest is he bringing you?" ADAOBI would look at Victor's nets spread across the fence and say nothing. Abena began visiting Abeokuta. She would arrive in a sleek car, her clothes immaculate, her connections impressive. She spoke of business trips to Milan, of fabric buyers in Paris, of an opportunity to open a joint atelier, ADAOBI's designs, Abena's family's capital. She sat at ADAOBI's table, sipping palm wine with the composure of someone who had been rehearsing this role for years. When Victor came home one evening, tired and salted from a long day on the water, he found Abena at the table, laughing at something ADAOBI had said, the good clay plates out, the good palm wine uncorked. "And who is this?" Abena asked, looking at Victor. Before ADAOBI could speak, Mama Chidinma was faster. "Oh, this is a relative from the village. He comes sometimes to help with things around the compound. He is a fisherman. You know how these men are, hardworking, humble." Victor stood in the doorway. He looked at ADAOBI. She looked at the table. She said nothing. He walked to the river. He sat at the edge of the water where he had always sat since he was a boy, the same place where his father had taught him to hold a net, where ADAOBI and him had spoken of futures, where the Ogun River moved as it had always moved, without judgment, without hurry. He sat there for a long time. When he returned, the visitor was gone, the table was cleared, and ADAOBI was in the bedroom with her back to the door. "ADAOBI, why did your mother say those things?" "She was trying to protect me." "From what? From her own son-in-law?" "Victor, please, I am tired." He stood in the doorway, his words unspoken, and turned away. The cruelties came slowly, then all at once. He was moved from their bed. "You wake too early," Mama Chidinma said. "Your movements disturb ADAOBI's rest." He slept on a mat in the outer room. Then the outer room became too good for him. You track sand into the house, you smell of the river, you are ruining the mats ADAOBI bought. Victor did not argue. He spread his sleeping mat under the mango tree in the compound, the same tree under which he had told ADAOBI he loved her for the first time. He lay there at night, watching the stars move above him, listening to the laughter coming from inside his own home. The morning came when he rose before dawn, as always, his religion, his ritual, and found his fishing boat gone from its mooring. Not stolen, moved. He traced it downstream and found it lodged against a sandbank, a rope deliberately cut, and his nets in it tangled and ruined. He stood in the water, his trousers soaked to the knee, looking at the damage. He had no doubt about how it happened. He spent the whole day untangling, patching, salvaging. He came home at dusk exhausted and found the compound gate locked with a padlock he did not own. 2 bundles tied in old raffia cloth sat outside the gate.
His clothes, his father's fishing weights, a photograph, he and ADAOBI on their wedding day, standing before the Olumo rock, her head thrown back in laughter, his eyes full of the particular brightness of a man who believes the future is kind. He knocked. He called her name. The window above opened. Mama Chidinma leaned out. "Go back to your river, fisherman. You have no business here anymore." "Let me speak to my wife." "Your wife has grown beyond you. A river does not mourn the stone it leaves behind. Go." He called louder. "ADAOBI, it is me, please." Behind the window cloth, a silhouette moved. He knew the shape of her the way he knew the shape of his own hands. He had crossed rivers for that shape. He had woken before sunrise for that shape for 3 years. Her voice came through the cloth, thin as smoke. "Thank you for everything, Victor, but we are no longer walking the same road. Please go." The cloth fell back. He picked up his bundles. He walked for a long time through the town, past the market where he had sold fish for years, past the textile stall where he had once bought ADAOBI her first good set of dye pots, past the motor park, until he reached the outskirts where the road narrowed and the trees grew close together. He sat beneath an iroko tree by the roadside, his bundles beside him, the photograph in his hands. His fingers, still moving from old habit, reached into the pocket of his agbada and found a small folded piece of paper he did not remember placing there. He opened it. It was a letter, old from 3 months ago, one he had received and forgotten in the grinding daily work of survival. It was from a government land acquisition office in Abuja. It read, "Dear Mr. Victor Okafor, following the geological survey of the Ogun River Basin, we write to inform you that the 3 plots of riverfront land registered in your father's name and transferred to you upon his passing have been identified as containing significant deposits of kaolin clay, a mineral of high commercial value to the ceramics and cosmetics industries. The National Mineral Development Authority wishes to acquire these plots. The compensation offered is as follows." He stared at the figure. He read it again. He folded the paper carefully, put it back in his pocket, and looked up at the sky through the branches of the iroko tree. He did not shout. He did not dance. He simply exhaled, a long, slow breath, like a man who has been holding something heavy for a long time and has finally found a place to set it down. 2 years passed. Victor was not the same man, and he was entirely the same man. The land compensation had made him wealthy, quietly, deliberately, irreversibly wealthy. He had invested well on the advice of good people, and his wealth had grown the way the river grows in rainy season, naturally, powerfully, without announcing itself. He bought a clean, modern home near the Ogun River, not because he was trying to prove anything, but because the river had always been his home. He did not post on social media. He did not wear his wealth like a costume. He simply lived. But he watched. He watched as Abena's family business collapsed under a fraud investigation, and ADAOBI's partnership she had staked her reputation on evaporated overnight. He watched as ADAOBI's visa to present her work at a fabric fair in Accra was declined, a small clerical matter that had large consequences for someone who had burnt her bridges carelessly. He watched as the compound in Abeokuta came under new ownership, a development company that had bought the land, and Mama Chidinma and ADAOBI were given notice to vacate. He watched, not with joy, but with the quiet understanding of a man who has sat beside a river long enough to know that water always finds its level. The day arrived. ADAOBI and Mama Chidinma sat in the waiting room of a gleaming building in Ibadan. They were there to petition for an extension on their eviction and to request a letter of support for ADAOBI's work permit renewal. The room was cool and still, the kind of stillness that belongs to serious places. The door opened. Victor sat behind the desk. He wore a simple, beautifully cut kaftan, not extravagant, but precisely made, the kind of cloth that speaks for itself. His hands, which ADAOBI once ashamed of, were coiled on the desk. Beside those hands was an object she recognized immediately, his old fishing knife, the bone-handled one his father had given him, the one he had always carried on the river. He had placed it on the desk, the way a man puts down a part of his story he is ready to move past. Mama Chidinma's mouth fell open. ADAOBI's legs simply stopped working. She sat down without meaning to, her hand gripping the arm of the chair. "Victor," she breathed. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was measured, not cold, not warm, simply present, the way the river is always present, neither rushing nor retreating. "The land this building sits on," he said, "was acquired by my company. The development firm that sent your eviction notice is mine. I did not engineer these circumstances, but I will not pretend I am surprised by them." He reached into his desk and set something between them. It was the photograph, their wedding day before the Olumo rock. He had kept it in good condition. "You told me we were no longer walking the same road," he said. "You were right. I am not here to punish you. Punishment is not mine to give, but I want you to understand something." He looked fully at ADAOBI, and she saw it. Not rage, not bitterness, but a deep and settled sorrow. The river does not hit the stone that changes its banks, but the river does not return to where it has already been. It only moves forward. He stood. "I have arranged 6 months of accommodation support for you, not because I owe it, but because I was raised to have character, even when character is not returned. After that, you will need to find your own way." He looked at Mama Chidinma. "I hold no malice towards you, but I want you to know, the man you called a river boy, a fisherman, a village man, that man built something, not to impress you, not to shame you, but because that is his nature. That has always been his nature." He picked up the fishing knife and held it a moment. "I am going back to the river," he said simply. "It is where I belong, and it is where I have always been most myself." He walked to the door. ADAOBI rose. Her voice came out broken. "Victor, I am sorry. I know those words are not enough, but..." He paused at the door without turning. "They are enough," he said quietly. "They are exactly enough. Take care of yourself, ADAOBI." He walked out. ADAOBI stood at the window of that office building and watched him cross the courtyard below, his kaftan catching the afternoon light, unhurried, undefeated. She watched until he turned a corner and was gone. Mama Chidinma stood behind her, and for the first time in her adult life, she had nothing to say. ADAOBI looked at the photograph still on the desk. She picked it up, her own face looking back at her, full of a joy she had thrown away with 2 hands. Outside, the Ogun River moved on, as it always had. It did not ask for thanks. It simply flowed. And the elders say, the person who pours water for another forgets, but the ground remembers. My friend,
If you loved this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking stories.